closed a transaction months ago, and the buyer and seller have not stopped connecting with me on what the seller didn't do and what the buyer didn't do, and da 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 da. And now they've blocked each other, and I'm dragged back in. I've already been paid. Escrow's already closed, and there's something going on with the AR that's not like some of the corporate accounts continue to pay the seller. Even though, anyway, it's a long, stupid story with lots of details that I can't really even follow, but they're asking me to now meet, the seller's now asking me to meet with them so that, she wants statements and she wants this, and I don't know how much I'm obligated to continue. They're not getting along, and so how involved do you get with, with a buyer seller that's already, should be in my past?
Well, that's a great question. It depends, actually. It depends. So how long was the transition period supposed to be?
It was supposed to be a month of training. The seller is a little bit problematic. She's overbearing, she's a little unstable. The buyer is a young, go get 'em type of like, I just want to get this done, doesn't want to listen to extra fluff material. So the training period quickly fell apart.
Yeah. So the seller attempted to do the training. The buyer didn't want to listen.
The buyer didn't have the bandwidth to withstand, because the transaction, we had to deal with the seller a lot and be patient a lot. It's a 30-year legacy for the seller, so she just wanted to repeat that over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Basically wanted to control the business from beyond after she let go of the business. And the buyer knew in her heart, well, once the business is mine, it's mine, right? So
Right.
we kind of have that dynamic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and so at this point, then, and if they've blocked each other and they're not communicating, I mean, that's fine for them to do. But your job, for the most part, your job is done. It's been done. And if there's questions or problems now where there are payments being made to the seller that should be made to the buyer needs to send out notification to those clients saying that the business has been sold, that all future payments are supposed to be going to her, if that's
Right.
the case.
Yeah, well, there's a transition, with, like, for example, Whole Foods. They just do auto pays, and they don't, there was supposed to be a 30-day transition, but actually the payments were going to the seller still. So the seller owes AR, additional AR to the buyer, and now the buyer's like, you got to pay us, and the seller's like, well, you still owe me money for this and that, and the whole accounting.
So as far as trying to settle up, I mean, it depends on the terms of the contract. So if the AR was supposed to be included and was supposed to go to the buyer, then that's very simple. It's look at the cutoff date. Any payments that that the seller received after closing go to the buyer, period. Now, if the buyer owes the seller for something, was there a note? Or what is it that the seller says the buyer owes for?
According to the seller, something with the whips. I don't know. I mean, I couldn't get involved in the details because I'm like, I'm out of this. But you're thinking that I should get back involved or something?
No, I mean, I think that I would probably just send both of them an email that just says, look, according to the terms of the contract, training was supposed to go from here to here. Accounts receivable was included in the purchase. So after the closing date of whatever the date was, all receivables received by the seller should be turned over to the buyer. Just put it in writing, and then at that point, if they have future issues, they can address it through small claims court, or they can address it however they choose to. But
Well, how I got dragged back into it, it was, them crying legal. I'm gonna call my lawyer, this is gonna,
they
and
can call their lawyers. I mean, look, that's their right to do it.
Mhm.
It doesn't make sense though. I mean, if the AR issue is probably the simplest. So whatever other side agreement they may have had that the seller's talking about, as far as like website, was that proration, that escrow was supposed to prorate the website or something? I mean, that the seller paid for the hosting for a year, and
No, it's not even that. It's just, stupid details about, how the bookkeeper was still owed, and let's see, related to cost. There was the bookkeeper was supposed to transition, and the seller wanted the buyer to pay her for a month, to transition all the records over. I mean, there's a bunch of crap. And then
but was that part of the contract? Or was that some separate agreement that you
that
weren't
was a
even
separate
involved?
agreement. It was outside of the APA. It was like,
Okay.
I want the bookkeeper to be paid and to transition everybody's books.
And
I
the
want
buyer agreed to that, to your
Yeah,
knowledge?
the buyer did the yeah, just to shut the seller up, because the seller was just so overbearing on all the details that she wanted. She kind of wanted the deal to go her way. This is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. But I don't know what actually transpired actually after we closed escrow, because these are things outside of escrow.
Right. And
So
that's all you need to say in the the email that you sent to him. Just say, look,
these are
I was,
outside, yeah.
I was facilitating, and I understand what the terms of the contract were, and past that point, any side agreements or verbal agreements that you guys made between each other, I don't have any knowledge of, so I'm not in a position to help you or to be involved,
Okay,
and just
yeah.
let it go, because it's not your place, and you don't need to play mediator. And you might suggest that, per the terms of the contract, if they have a dispute, they may want to go to a
Go
mediator.
through mediation.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yes, and I'm not a mediator.
hire a mediator and go talk to them.
Okay,
But
yeah, yeah.
you're not a
I'm
mediator.
curious, Ann, who was your client, the seller or the buyer?
The seller. Yeah, we always,
Uh,
well, no, actually, excuse me.
Dual
Let me
agent,
take that back.
probably, right?
Yeah, let me take that back. I referred the seller to an associate of mine at my brokerage, because I was
oh,
busy at the time. And she's a time suck. And so I said, well, maybe Lita can help you. And then months later, and then I brought a buyer to the table, because I knew her parameters. And then months later, the deal fell apart between the buyer and seller when we first transacted. And then months later, the buyer approached me and said, would you represent me? Because I still want to buy this business. She had a vision for it, right? The buyer.
uh,
So at that point, I was transacting sort of like within our brokerage, both sides, but I
oh
legally
boy.
represented the buyer because I signed a buyer rep. Why? What?
Well,
Mhm.
I mean, I guess it's lesson learned, but you could jump in now at the 11th hour and turn this into great referrals on both sides, right? And it's easier to wipe your hands and walk away, but the problem persists, and I know both have a bad taste in their mouth. Yeah, and then nothing will happen. It's easy to refer them to their attorney, but this is why things like earnouts always make sense, right? Because then if you want 10 million, I'll give you 5 today, and the next 5 come over the next 2 years. That keeps you showing up, and that makes sure that the transition and the milestones happen, right? So that's a problem. When I write you the check, and then we all walk away, you walk away with your commission, and the buyer takes over the business. And a month later, the bookkeeper, it turns out the bookkeeper just does what the seller told her to do, you know, her former boss. And so now everybody's paralyzed and everybody has to refer back to the seller. And the seller's, you know, sitting on receivables and claiming you owe me this. It's never easy. But, you know, the legal course is obviously, it seems like it's imminent just on all the things you're rattling off. Because if I were the buyer, I would be a little disgruntled, you know, buyer's remorse, as we call it. But, you know, it's a good chance for you to, you know, just to jump in and just, you know what I mean, and be really stern and just take control of both of them. And, you know, make, you know, you put a list of your, you know, this is what's owed to you. You put a list of what, you know, what you allege is owed to you, and then force them to sort it out. Be that voice of reason. And then you'll have two great referrals.
Oh, I don't think there's enough money in it for me to jump back in. I don't
See,
really
it's
think
easy.
there's enough money in it.
Yeah, I
to-
could tell by the way you're rubbing something on the desk there. You weren't agreeing. Body language.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
And I
I just
just,
love drama, perhaps. I don't know. But
yeah, no, I don't like
I'm
other
also a
people's
fan of
drama.
earnouts for that reason.
Yeah, other people's drama is never my thing.
I know.
You just have to be careful when you get involved, especially if they are, you know, headed, if they're headed for some type of
Court.
legal
Yeah.
resolution.
Uh-huh.
And mediation is actually a good thing. If you can get them to agree to go mediate, there are low-cost mediators that'll do half a day free. And
Oh,
you
really?
can do, you know, what Michael was saying, have both of them write out what they believe they're owed and why. And, you know, let them pitch that to a mediator. But again, you don't really have, you're not aware, you don't have the knowledge of what their side agreements were to even try to deal with that. And the last thing you want to do is be accused of giving them any type of legal advice.
Exactly, exactly. You know, now that, you know, legal's been thrown around, I'm like, I don't think I need to be involved in this. You know, and my broker, one of the senior agents in my brokerage did say, block those people. I'm like, I'm not sure I should block them.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't block people. I don't think that that's a professional way of handling things.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
But I think you do need to extract yourself in a way, in a, you know, from the situation in an appropriate way.
Mm,
And that is communicating, right? You have to communicate with them that, you know, your role as the broker in facilitating the transaction has been completed. You are typically not part of a transition team. Did they have any assistance? You know, did they have a consultant or anybody helping them with the transition? I mean, there's a lot of different
yeah,
ways
they
that
they have
transactions can.
they each had their own assistants.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we did what we did and our job was done, you know.
Yeah. So
How they
provide
get
them with
along
suggestions.
afterlife, how they get along afterlife, I think is beyond my scope, you know. I mean, I was there to put a transaction together initially. I didn't want to represent the seller. She was very overbearing. I understood that she was going to take up a lot of my time for her business. And so I gave her to somebody in my firm.
Yeah.
And then the buyer approached me, you know, because I did find the buyer, and then later she approached me and asked me to represent her. So I did, just to kind of just let's put this to bed, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely would suggest to the two of them that you don't resolve disagreements by blocking people.
True.
You know, if you want to resolve, you want to get resolution, then the only way to resolution is through communication. And communication needs to be very logical and very open. And they need to check the emotions at the door and have a conversation. You know, and if they can boil it down to bullet points, here's what I believe you owe me and why, you know, then maybe they can create their own type of reconciliation. I mean, there are certain parts of that are very black and white, like accounts receivable, but there are other things that may not be. However, if the buyer was just yesing the seller to death to move the transaction along, verbal agreements are valid. If the seller said, I want you to pay the bookkeeper for a month through the transition, and the buyer said, yeah, okay. That's a verbal agreement. You don't get to yes somebody to death to move something along and then afterwards say, oh, well, I was just kidding, or I didn't mean it, or whatever, because seller obviously was partially relying on that information. So, you know, there's probably valid points on both sides, but the only way they're going to be able to resolve anything is through communication. And if they're not willing to do that, then they definitely need a mediator, because then one can, you know, buyer can communicate with the mediator will go in the other room, or they do it on Zoom now. So, you know, switch and go talk to the seller and convey what the concerns are, or portions of the concerns. And then seller is going to, you know, give their side of the story, and mediator will go back. And
Right,
basically, what did they want? What do each of them want? You know? Because
does
that's what it
CAP
comes down to.
offer a list of mediation services or any of that stuff too?
No, but you can usually go to what county are you in?
Alameda, Contra Costa.
Yeah, you can go to the bar association, your local bar association website, and they usually have some type of alternative dispute resolution, ADR. They'll have a link,
okay.
and usually they'll have some type of a low cost mediation where the mediators will do half a day free, and then, you know, it's rare that anybody settles in half a day, so they always end up getting paid, because usually your mediation is going to go all day long. Because people never come to the table ready to actually try and resolve until they get tired. And they get tired after lunch.
Okay, is that right? Okay.
Well, I mean, that's been my experience. But if you do have people who are truly motivated to settle, they really want to just move on. They want to get things resolved and move on. Yeah, you can do it in half a day.
Okay.
They just have to come prepared, and they have to come with the mindset that I'm not going to get everything I want, because it's a mediation. So it's not going to be 100% my way. It's not my way or the highway, right? So, but definitely a good mediator can open the lines of communication and probably get a resolution for these two people so that they can both go their separate ways and do it peacefully without any resentment.
Okay. Yeah, no, good idea. Yeah.